Hey everybody, it's Matt Shears. I'm here for another week of the Revenue Growth Help Desk, and I'm thrilled to welcome probably one of the best looking people I've seen, and that has nothing to do with the fact that he looks like me. All kidding aside, I'm really happy to welcome Tim Brackey. Tim's the president and COO of RGP. Gotten to know Tim well over the last few years, and we've been having a lot of questions around growth culture and building culture, sustaining culture, evolving culture in an environment like we're in right now in the middle of summer 2020. And I couldn't think of a better person to bring on the show and answer many of the questions that we've been getting. So Tim, maybe as a way of getting started, other than complimenting you on what's a fantastic jacket, why don't you introduce yourself, RGP, and then you and I could get into the show.
Absolutely, Matt. Great to see you. It's been too long, my friend. Hopefully we can connect live and in person someday. I look forward to that. I'm just pleased to be on the show. My name's Tim Brackey. I'm the president and chief operating officer of RGP. We're a NASDAQ traded talent platform that I think of us as an agile talent platform that engages with our clients in sort of two ways. One, we can burst resource for professional staffing, and we can integrate in on a project consulting side as well. But the engine of our business is an agile talent platform that we've built over the last 20 years.
And Tim, if for those that are listening and watching that wouldn't be as familiar with where they might bump into RGP or where would they use RGP, can you give a little bit of context into that, which will help contextualize what you and I are going to cover?
Absolutely. Well, our client list is some of the biggest companies in the world. So we engage with clients globally. So depending on the environment that you're in, you're likely to run into us either functionally in the finance and accounting or in the professional services arena. When I think about project management and large initiatives, transformations digitally, we're involved in those. Our client base sort of spans the large and the very large. So from, like I mentioned, from the FTSE 50 to the Fortune 500. But we also dip down and have a sort of broad spectrum of clients that we work with even in the middle market.
Great. All right. So for those that are watching and listening, what are you going to get out of today's show? So every week, the SBI team, Melissa and Kate, pay a lot of attention to the questions that come in that were asked about what are the big trends, what's happening. Something that's top of mind for everybody what's going on in the world, especially with things socially that are happening, is around culture that's created and the evolving types of culture and this whole concept around us being virtual, being mobile. What do people need? Always very important for sales, and go-to-market has been highly disrupted. But Tim, I really thought it would be great if we sort of hit on three things. Number one, my team and I thought you wrote an incredible article about and coined this phrase, inde-ployment, and I want to have you talk about that because I think it's really great. Second thing we're going to talk a little bit about is what does a growth culture look like in 2020 heading into 21, and how should people be thinking? Because I think you're doing some really evolutionary things. And then third, the impact on digital, and what does that mean as companies continue to evolve? So I think, Tim, maybe talk a little bit about one of my new favorite terms, which came from you. So I want to make sure you have full attribution. What does inde-ployment mean? And talk a little bit about that article and the essence of what you wrote, because I thought it was really compelling.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I mean, inde-ployment is really kind of the combination of how independent contractors think and the word employment. And so those two forces, when you think about that, are sort of antithetical to each other, right? If you're an independent contractor, you're basically sort of mercenary and out for yourself, but you love the control that it gives you. But really, you're not part of a pack. You're not part of a community. You don't have a safety net other than what you're providing for yourself. And so, as the macro trends are changing, both generationally and for what the workforce wants, is that people really want to have their cake and eat it too. They want the freedom, control, and mobility of the independent contractor, but they want the safety and the feeling of belonging that comes with being employed and being part of a larger team that's going after a common goal. And so what I think is interesting is that as the world has started to shift, the demand for being able to get both of those things in alignment has become more prevalent. And there are of course trade-offs, but the world itself is going to a place where everybody is going to want to have their cake and eat it too. And as people can provide more of that continuum. So if you thought of it as on an X and Y axis, and you thought of the X axis actually being freedom, and you thought of the Y axis as being belonging, if you get into the upper right, that's exactly where people want to be. And everything underneath that is sort of a trade-off.
So let's stay on the XY. I love that example, because if you think about the dynamics of a traditional large organization, which you run a very large organization, but if you think about the go-to-market organization, and we're about the same age, the way we grew up with an inside team, a middle market team, an enterprise team, you get on planes, you go do big deals. Now there's this complete blending, being virtual. How much belonging do I feel being part of a company or a sales force on Zoom? How do I create connection with a client? How do I create connection with a new prospect and open up a new door? So I can get access faster, but is the access as deep? So I sort of look at access and intimacy as a couple of challenges. So maybe talk a little bit about that, because I think you guys have done some really evolutionary things to sort of answer this forcing function that a pandemic has put upon us.
Yeah, the interesting part about pandemic, I mean, it's really an accelerant, but it's forced, like everything else, it's forced the pendulum all the way to one side. And in reality, the world is going to come back, and it'll modulate a little bit, and we'll moderate. But what it'll end up doing is moving us farther to the right than where we were before. So in this world that we're in now, what you're really trying to do is not. I think it's harder to natively create new connections right now, because that first connection is, if it's done virtually, is one that's going to have to be nurtured in a different way than, as you mentioned, the intimacy of meeting somebody in person and then switching to a different modality.
Yeah.
So for customers, I think it's a little bit more tricky. And so what sales forces have tried to do, what our teams have tried to do with our customers, especially new ones, is create that connection in multiple ways. Maybe bringing somebody to the call that they might not have done before. Like we'll bring our CEO to the call if it creates a little bit more of a sense of making that interaction special, especially the initial one. And then it's sort of a mutual pitch, and then you kind of move it, and you've started your relationship up at a different place. If you've had an existing relationship, you don't have to worry about that initial spark or connection. But really what you have to do is worry that, like all of us are on interminable Zoom calls right now. And so what we've said is less is more. Understand that people don't want to hear with an abundance of caution and starting their sentences anymore. What they want to know is that you respect their time, and so that the amount of time that you spend with them, if you can give them back time and still give them value, that will let them know that you understand. It's really kind of like cements the relationship. When we come back, it'll be a combination of things, and just intentional meetings. In-person meetings will be important, because nobody will do as many in-person meetings. There will be less travel, and so if you're gonna do it, it has to be special. It has to be something that creates a unique proposition and not just a drop-in.
Tim, how do you? So that's really well said. So sort of transitioning to that second component we talked about at the top of the show. If you think about creating a growth culture, we often get asked about, like, what does a sales culture feel like? What's a growth culture feel like? Like, what's the ethos of that? I know over the last few years, you have been really going through an evolution in the business model at RGP and putting something in place that's a real differentiator. And we like to think about this as it's more about like a revenue growth culture, and we measure this, truly measure it, and report on it, every September, which will be coming out in a couple of months. So as you think about changes in your sales force and the way the organization is rallied around that, are there a couple that you've noticed on the positive that, regardless of pandemic, no pandemic, you're going to push harder on those because it's actually accelerated your growth culture?
Yeah, there are a few things. I mean, I think what's interesting too is that, when you shift a culture to go into a growth culture, and for us, kind of the big thing that we had to harp on was sort of discipline and accountability. And, for anybody who plays golf, you're governing yourself, right? You're calling strokes, you're calling penalties on yourself, and you're really trying to stay within yourself. What's interesting that with a culture of accountability, and then using cloud-based tools, cloud-based CRMs and the like, you can really monitor everything from in process to output metrics. In our old world, we were very much focused on output, but everybody knows those are lagging indicators. By the time you realize that something was amiss, you're already posting a number that you didn't want to post.
Right.
So what I would say is that, you know, we really shifted to focusing on in-process metrics, really thinking about sales motion, really focusing on people's patches and making sure that the connections that we were making were I keep using the word special, but they were impactful ones. I mean, because and so in a virtual world, we can still focus on those, but really what you find is that there are kernels around account management that force you into tunnels and pathways that maybe you wouldn't have taken before, but now you have the opportunity to sort of radiate more opportunity. We really have focused on that as opposed to sort of plowing the same ground, trying to figure out how to get into other buying centers. But I'll tell you one thing, and it's very easy, again, to measure in-process metrics, but if you get into that too much, what you start to realize, particularly in this world, is that you have to manage with a little bit more empathy and create more of a high trust environment and trust that people are governing themselves, because we have the ability to almost monitor anybody doing anything at any time. And that's not the world, big brother world you want to have. So one of the metrics that we look at is retention of our key people. Like, I mean, how many people are coming in and are staying with us because we've given them the opportunity to hit a big number, but because they like being with us and understand that we operate with high trust.
Yeah. Tim, if you think about that separation, so the account management example is really good, because a big trend we've seen is the way people are, you know, creating moats with alligators and wire fences around their customers, right? Because getting new deals done, with a few exceptions, there's a few sectors obviously that are going crazy. Getting new deals done has been harder. It's harder to get consensus. It's harder to get just a deal approved through procurement because people are hanging on to cash, et cetera. Are there certain things that you've seen the way the team has been radiating the trust that's actually getting pulled through to revenue, where clients are like, man, this is different than what RGP would have done 6 months ago or 12 months ago? Could you maybe share, you know, one or two examples on that?
I love the moats and alligators, because that's really true. I mean, if you think about it, and I think it's true in most cases, that the best opportunity you have, unless you're fully penetrated inside of a client, is that within your own client base, that's where your biggest opportunity is. If there's one of the silver linings we've gotten out of the pandemic, is that it's forced us to go deep and wide in the customers that we already know. And you know, in terms of moats and alligators, one of the advantages you have, built-in advantages you have, as you know, with existing customers, that like there are raving fans that you have a hunting license because you have some sort of master services agreement with them. You don't have the distraction of the shiny new toy going after something new that might pop up over there. And it's forced us to really focus on both going more global with our clients, but also asking our raving fans to introduce us to people that we hadn't asked to before, and we're able to slowly, even virtually, cement new relationships. And that's a way, you know, incidentally, when you ask me, like, how do you, because that's still a new client, it's within the same account, but it's a new client, how do you do it? We found that even having sort of virtual interactions where one client introduces us to the other and then stays on for a bit and then drops off, and they're very willing to do that, has really taken the trust meter up immediately, so we don't have to come up a steep curve to do that.
That's a great idea. Love that. So, and obviously you can't do that if you don't have a high trust environment. And on this last piece, you know, we're going to talk about, you know, in you all help companies transform, you know, pardon the most overused term, and I'm more of a fan of evolve, but digital is something that, as you said, pendulum swing. You talk about the need to be digital and go to market, and a forcing function. No doubt that's what's happened now. So, Tim, how do you think about maybe the steps you guys have made on your digital evolution? But if you look out 18 months, are there things you've changed now in your outlook on the forward-looking strategy? And because you guys try to be a leader, because you help a lot of other companies transform and catch up when they get stuck in an old way of thinking. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's really funny, and it's very timely that you bring that up, because in some ways, we have to eat our own dog food, and I agree with you. I think in some instances you have to transform so that you can get into a world where you can evolve, and that's kind of where we were. We had to make some pretty big step change that allowed us to get both culturally and operationally in a way that we could turn the dials more easily year to year and make change. We've done a lot on our digital path, but we have a long ways to go. I think I think there are sort of three ways that I think that we need to, that we will, like in the relatively near future, increase our digital footprint. Number one is our ability to interact digitally with our clients. If you think about on the burst resourcing side of our business, the ability to match the talent. If there are many clients who are digital natives who grew up shopping on Amazon, they want to be able to find their own product, right? And we need to be able to create that for them. It's a curated experience where they can still jump off. So maybe it's more like Stitch Fix than Zappos, but it's giving them that ability to kind of interact directly, right? So that from a client side is important. But I think the thing that's probably the most important for us, if I pivoted back to thinking about inde-ployment and focusing more on the deployment side, is how for our talent can we offer a better consultant experience? Like, completely re-architecting operationally what it looks like from the time you're attracted to come in, and curating career journeys and those types of things, and using a digital front end and a digital journey to kind of pull it all together. And that is honestly, and I'll use the most overused phrase again, that's a transformational thing for us, because it gets at the heart of the supply side of our business and will completely change the stickiness of our platform. So we're really, really working on that. And then the last bit is sort of that matching function. It's algorithmic. We've already started. We've built an algorithm that we're going to continue to enhance. But those three pieces coming together, I think, can be game changers for us.
Great answer. So Tim, if you had, I guess, as a parting comment for those that are watching and listening as they head into the back half and think about this mobility, virtual, I want to be free, but I still want to belong to something. If there was one hard-hitting piece of advice you would give as a must-have or must-do, what would that be?
Don't abandon culture. I think it's really easy to think about how tools and the pandemic have forced us into this sense that, hey, we can do things, but the ability to do things and wanting to do things are totally different things. And so if you don't nurture the culture, especially for new entrants into the work, new colleagues coming into your firm, they won't get the benefit of that connective tissue that ties everybody together. And so if you just assume you can lift and shift simply because we can talk to each other over a camera, you're going to find that the mobility side is going to take over, and they're going to find people who figured out how to transfer the soul of their company into a virtual world. Well,
and man, what a great way to close the show. I mean, here's what my parting comments would be, and to our viewers and listeners is, if you don't understand how to measure, people talk about measuring engagement, right? And in internal satisfaction, but also like having a growth culture that's contemporary, Tim, right? That people feel connected virtually. You're providing them tools, but you're also providing them with belonging. And it's something I would tell you, 5 years ago, we didn't measure growth culture. We measured sales satisfaction. Does my quota match my territory potential? Is my comp plan fair? And can I explain the variable? That's like table stakes.
Yeah.
People are way more demanding now. And that's why we've shifted the last couple of years to this concept of a growth culture index, because it matters. And people that are way younger than you and I, that is more on their list than, do I get a 5X accelerator if I beat my plan? They're less driven by money than they are by belonging. So I think that's really, really well said. So appreciate you coming on, man. Always good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
But by the way, I know a lot of people are doing like these fancy Zoom backgrounds. I see a whiteboard behind you that is giving some evidence that actual work was getting done. But knowing you as I do, is that just a prop in a background, or is that actually your handwriting and thinking?
judging by the illegibility of it, it's clearly my handwriting. But I'll tell you, I thought we were going to be on Zoom and I was going to pop up a clean background. And so since we weren't on Zoom, you got my chicken scratch in the background.
Dude, this is what people want. They want raw footage, bro. This is E360 the real way. So
I love it. I love it.
great to see you, man. Appreciate
see you,
you as
brother.
always, and we'll see you soon, bro.